On December 1st, 1955, in the Deep South, a quiet revolution began. The city of Montgomery, Alabama, was segregated, just like much of the United States at that time. Public spaces, schools, restaurants, even drinking fountains were divided along racial lines. White citizens occupied one side, while African Americans were forced to stay in their designated areas. The system was designed to keep people apart, to remind them of who held the power and who was considered less than. One of the most visible forms of segregation was on the city buses. In Montgomery, the front rows of buses were reserved for white passengers, while black riders were forced to sit in the back. If a bus became crowded, black passengers were required to give up their seats so that white passengers could sit. Rosa Parks, a 42-year-old seamstress, knew these rules well. She had been living under the harsh realities of segregation for her entire life. As a member of the NAACP, Rosa had been actively fighting against these oppressive systems for years, but like many African Americans in the South, she also knew the dangers of open resistance. To stand against the segregation laws was to risk harassment, violence, or worse. Yet, on that day in December, something changed. After finishing her shift as a seamstress at a local department store, Rosa boarded the Cleveland Avenue bus, which she had done countless times before. She paid her fare and took a seat in the first row designated for black passengers, just behind the white section. The bus was relatively empty at first, but as it made its stops, more passengers climbed aboard. As the white section filled up, one man was left standing. The driver, James F. Blake, who had run-ins with Rosa before, noticed the imbalance and stopped the bus. He walked to the middle of the aisle and pointed to Rosa and three other black passengers. "You need to move," he said, demanding that they give up their seats so the white man could sit. The other three passengers reluctantly rose and moved to the back of the bus, but Rosa didn't move. She remained seated, staring straight ahead. The driver repeated his demand, but Rosa quietly refused. She wasn't being defiant just for the sake of rebellion. She wasn't looking to become a symbol or a leader of a movement. She simply felt in that moment she could no longer comply. She had spent her entire life following rules that treated her and others like second-class citizens. But on that cold winter day, her weariness turned into courage. She thought about the years of humiliation, the tiredness in her bones, and the future of her people. And she said, "No." The driver, frustrated, threatened to have her arrested. Rosa knew the consequences of what she was doing. She had heard the stories of what happened to those who defied the segregation laws, but still, she remained seated. Soon, two police officers arrived. One of them asked Rosa why she didn't move. Calmly, she responded, "Why do you push us around?" To which the officer replied, "I don't know, but the law is the law and you're under arrest." They took Rosa into custody. That night, word of Rosa's arrest spread throughout Montgomery's African American community. The news reached E.D. Nixon, a prominent local leader and member of the NAACP. Nixon had been looking for the right case to challenge the city's segregation laws in court, and Rosa Parks seemed like the perfect person to take on that role. She was well respected, dignified, and determined. The decision was made to launch a full-scale boycott of Montgomery's buses. The boycott began on December 5, 1955, and it was led by a young preacher named Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. King, only 26 at the time, had recently moved to Montgomery and was just beginning to make a name for himself in the local civil rights scene. He quickly became the public face of the boycott, which lasted for 381 days. During this time, the African American community in Montgomery showed incredible resolve. Many walked miles to work each day instead of riding the segregated buses. Others organized carpools or rode bicycles. The boycott put a tremendous strain on the city's transportation system and the local economy. Despite threats, violence, and legal intimidation, the boycott held strong. Rosa Parks, meanwhile, faced her own challenges. She lost her job as a seamstress due to her arrest and became a target of harassment. She and her husband Raymond eventually moved to Detroit to escape the growing pressures in Montgomery. But Rosa's quiet defiance continued to echo across the country. The boycott ended in victory on November 13, 1956, when the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that segregation on public buses was unconstitutional. The decision marked a monumental victory for the civil rights movement and set the stage for further actions aimed at dismantling Jim Crow laws in the South. For Rosa Parks, the moment on the bus was just the beginning. Though she never sought fame or recognition, her courage became a symbol of the power of nonviolent resistance. She remained active in the civil rights struggle for the rest of her life, advocating for equality and justice wherever she could. In her own words, Rosa reflected on that fateful day, saying, "People always say that I didn't give up my seat because I was tired. But that isn't true. I was not tired physically, or no more tired than I usually was at the end of a working day. I was tired of giving in." Rosa Parks' simple act of resistance set in motion a movement that would change the course of American history. Her story reminds us that ordinary people can do extraordinary things, and that even the smallest act of defiance can spark a revolution. And that's the story of Rosa Parks, one woman's quiet courage that ignited a movement and changed the course of history. Her decision to remain seated wasn't just about a bus seat, it was about standing up for the dignity and rights of an entire people. Rosa reminds us that we all have the power to make a difference, no matter how small our actions may seem. If you found this story inspiring, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories from history. Share this video to remind others that true change often starts with one brave step, or, in Rosa's case, one brave seat. Thanks for watching, and remember, history is made by those who refuse to stay silent.